Innuendo, Book 5 of the Todd Mills Mystery Series. Author R.D. Zimmerman. Publisher Scribble Pub Press, Minneapolis, Minnesota. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 27. The Hennepin County Medical Center was a monolithic 8-story hospital built in the late 70s, a sprawling building that sat on the edge of downtown Minneapolis like a gigantic beetle. Fortunately for Geordie Weaver, thought Rawlings, as he hurried into the beige concrete complex, it had the best trauma center in the Twin Cities area. Once inside, it took Rawlings no less than 10 minutes to wind his way through the corridors to the intensive care unit, where he was directed down the hall to the second room on the right. Just as he approached the room, a short African-American man in a white robe stepped out, quietly pulling the door shut behind him. "Excuse me," said Rawlings, reaching into his leather coat for his badge. "I'm Sergeant Steve Rawlings with the Homicide Division of the Minneapolis Police Department, and I'm looking for Geordie Weaver." The man had a round face and short hair, small eyes, and a serious look on his face, and he held out his hand and said, "I'm Dr. Nevin, his doctor. Jordan's right here." Taking several steps, he led Rawlings to a large plate glass window. Lying on the other side was Geordie, his head swathed in gauze, his left arm packed in a cast, and his left leg swaddled in a mass of gauze and splints. His face, of which little was showing, was pocked with bruises, and a clear tube ran out of one nostril. All around him were a host of electronic monitors, their lights pulsing with regularity, which actually were the only indication that the otherwise lifeless body wasn't dead. "Oh my God," muttered Rawlings, staring in and barely able to recognize Geordie. "Is he going to be all right?" "He's a very lucky man. Lucky that they got him here so quickly, and lucky that he's so young. When he came in last night, I thought we were going to have to amputate his leg, but I think we'll be able to save it. I operated on him about 3 hours ago, and it looks like, with a great deal of therapy, he'll be able to walk. It'll be a long recovery, however." "Is that all? Is that—" "Well, he also has a concussion and a broken left arm, but neither of them is life-threatening. For what I understand, however, if the car that hit him had been going any faster, he would have been killed on the spot. I think everyone had slowed because of the heavy rain. Again, a lucky break, per se. I'm sure this isn't a good time, but I need to talk to him. It involves a murder case, so obviously it's very important." "Well, as you can see, that's impossible. He's only been out of surgery for a few hours. Can I come back later this morning? Or how about after lunch?" "Oh, no, not nearly that soon. He's on a great deal of medication, you see, sort of a drug-induced coma, and hopefully he won't wake up until later tonight, perhaps tomorrow." Dr. Nevin lowered his hands into the pockets of his robe and gazed through the glass at the young man. "Trust me, he's a very lucky fellow, but he's going to be in a lot of pain. The longer he's out, the better off he'll be." But Rawlings needed to talk to him, and he needed to talk to him now, if for no other reason than to find out if this horrible accident was somehow connected to the murder of Andrew Lyman. Yes, Geordie had somehow managed to survive his fall from the bridge onto the freeway, but was that not at all the intent? Could his life, in fact, still be in danger? The first time Rawlings and Andrew had lunch, Rawlings had picked him up at the apartment, a kind of queer teen flophouse, where he'd been living with Geordie and all those other kids. And then first thing this morning, hoping to interview Geordie regarding the death of his close friend and to see just what he might or might not know about Andrew's father, Rawlings had gone directly there. Instead of finding Geordie, however, Rawlings had found a handful of kids huddled around a ratty old kitchen table, terrified of what had happened to one of their own. All that they knew was what the police, who had found an envelope with Geordie's address in his coat pocket, had told them around 6 this morning, that Geordie had fallen off the LaSalle Avenue Bridge right into traffic on Interstate 94, and that he was in the hospital in intensive care. A couple of kids were praying that it wasn't a suicide attempt, particularly since another of their DQ pals had killed himself a mere 2 months ago. "But Geordie wouldn't have tried to kill himself. I just know it," one young man with short hair and a pierced nose had said. "We've been doing all these sessions, all this talking about queer teen suicide, and he wouldn't have let us down like that. I just know it." "Yeah, but he was so upset about Andrew," another had protested as he leaned against the refrigerator. "First Andrew moved out, and then he was killed. Jordy was really flipped out. I mean, really freaked. Still another, a young guy with red hair and patches of freckles on both cheeks, said, "But if it wasn't suicide, then what the fuck happened? I mean, hello, you just don't fucking fall off a freeway bridge. Could the same guy who killed Andrew have gone after Jordy? Oh, shit. Oh, fuck. We gotta stick together." Rawlings, in turn, had raced down here to HCMC, all the while wondering if Jordy had purposely jumped from the LaSalle Bridge, or if he'd been thrown or somehow pushed. For Jordy's safety, he had to presume the worst. "As I told you," said Rawlings now as he pulled out of his business card and handed it to Dr. Nevin, "this might be related to an ongoing murder investigation, so I'm going to give you my number. It's very important that you or anyone on your staff call me as soon as Jordy wakes up and is able to talk." "Of course. I'll leave those instructions at the nurse's desk. In the meantime, for the safety of your patient, I'm going to have a police officer posted outside this door. I want no one to go in except you and your staff." "I see," he said, his eyebrows rising in controlled surprise. "What about the family? I believe we got his home address off his driver's license and that our office has contacted his parents. If I'm not mistaken, they're on the way here." "That's fine. The police officer will need to check some identification, but again, I need to talk to him as soon as he wakes up." "Certainly." Rawlings glanced in at Jordy, wondered what truths were waiting to be told, and then said, "I'll be staying until we can get an officer posted." An hour later, Rawlings was at his desk on the second floor of City Hall. There was any variety of things to be done on the Lyman case, from checking to see when the final autopsy report would be in, to finding how long the DNA typing would take on the semen samples. Actually, the first thing Rawlings had to do was find his partner, Neil Foster, and tell him about Jordy Weaver. Quite possibly, he also needed to tell Foster that Andrew had been threatened by his father. But how the hell was Rawlings going to do that without bringing up the diary? Perhaps he could get around it somehow. Perhaps he could say that he'd heard something about Andrew's father from one of the kids down at the DQ. "Ah, shit," thought Rawlings. He had to come up with something like that, something to keep secret the revealing passages Andrew had written about Rawlins. He was, Rawlins knew, between the proverbial rock and a hard place, and he had virtually no idea how he was going to get out. Unfortunately, his problems with Todd seemed minor in comparison. Still, he was obviously going to have to speak to Foster sometime today. They were partners, after all, and they were going to have to draw up a plan of attack on this investigation, as well as write up some kind of progress report to submit to their boss, Lieutenant Halbert. Among the many things that needed to be discussed was the black mass that had been covering Andrew's eyes and whether they should continue to withhold that detail from the public. With all that in mind, and not knowing whether Foster was just downstairs or still in bed at home, Rawlings picked up his phone and dialed Foster's pager. Yes, he thought as he waited for the callback. This was a fine mess. If it ever got out, how the hell was he going to explain his involvement with Andrew Lyman? Better yet, who would believe him if he said nothing happened? Andrew's stupid diary, his silly confessions were nearly enough, not simply to get Rawlings fired from the force, but thrown in jail. A gay cop involved with a runaway minor? It screamed rape. It screamed headlines, and, guilty or not, it screamed witch hunt and the end of Rawlins' career. The phone rang more quickly than Rawlins anticipated, and he snatched the black phone from its cradle. "Sergeant Steve Rawlings." "Hi, it's me again?" No, it definitely wasn't Foster, and no, it surely wasn't Todd. It was some guy, his voice a tad meek, a bit unsteady, and at first, Rawlins' mind went blank. The next instant, he was very alert. It was him, the tipster. And the moment after that, Rawlins was telling himself to keep calm, be cool. He'd lose him if he scared him again, and he couldn't afford that. "Is this my friend?" began Rawlins as he quickly slid open his top desk drawer and pulled out a small black tape recorder and a long wire with a suction cup dangling from one end. "Yeah, it's me. The guy who saw that other guy down at Lake Harriet. I saw in the paper that you found something, that you took my tip, and that you guys went down there and everything." "That's right, and we all owe you a big thanks. Obviously, we would never have found anything without your help." Working as quietly as possible, Rawlins plugged one end of the wire into the tape recorder and then slapped the other end with its small suction cup onto the phone's receiver. Even though this specific conversation wouldn't be admissible in a court of law because the witness didn't know he was being taped, Rawlings pushed the record button. At this point, he needed anything and everything for his own hunt. And he sat back, telling himself to just sound cool, relaxed. Obviously, this guy is calling back because he's pleased with what happened, how things went, and you've got to make him believe not only that he's a hero, but you need him, which was more true than ever. So, was that it? Was that the hunting knife that was used to kill that kid? I mean, I hope you're able to nail whoever did it. Well, we did find it right where you said it would be, but we've got a ways to go. As he spoke, Rawlings pulled out a yellow notepad, jotted down the time, then proceeded to take notes. We found evidence of blood on the blade, and we also were able to get some blood samples from the nooks and crannies of the handle. Wow. Yeah, it's great. Our initial report shows that the blood type matches Andrew Lyman's, but it's going to take a while to get a DNA report. We're going to expedite it, but it's still going to take a week or so. Fortunately, the weapon wasn't in the water that long, and we were able to get a couple of good fingerprints too, which is the really good news. Apparently, there was some sort of oily substance on the handle that didn't wash off. Oh, good. I'm glad. Over some kind of background noise, the guy added, "You know what? There's something else." Really? Rawlings closed his eyes and focused not only on the voice, but also on the background noise. Was that a car, a bus, or a truck? Exactly. The guy was outside? Probably calling from some payphone. Chances were he was even here, downtown, perhaps. Only a matter of a few blocks away. God, what Rawlings wouldn't give to get a trace on this and have the guy picked up. After all, who was to say this wasn't their guy, that this story wasn't all a fabrication? Rawlings asked, "So what have you got?" "Well, you know, I was down there in those bushes, and I saw that guy, the bald guy I told you about." "Right. A muscular guy with a bald head," said Rawlings, writing that down. "Yeah, he was down at the lake, and I watched him throw the knife into the water." He broke off as the blast of a car horn drowned him out. "In case you were wondering, I'm calling from a payphone. Like I said, I don't want this call to be traced. I'm sorry. I just can't be more involved than I already am." In other words, you're a big closet case. Perhaps you're married, perhaps not, and rather than risk telling your friends and family that you're gay, you're more than willing to risk your health and safety by sneaking into the woods and having anonymous sex. That's okay," said Rawlings, at the same time trying to figure out how he could, in fact, do just that. Get him involved. "Go on." "Well, there was that car. Like I think I said, it was a Saab. I mean, I'm sure of that." "Tell me again what it looked like." "It was white with a black roof, so it was a convertible. I'm sure about that. And I remember looking at the black license plate." Rawlings wrote down a couple of notes, then bent forward, lowering his forehead into his left hand. "Oh, dear God in heaven, please let this be it. Tell me this guy, whoever he is, has a photographic memory." "Did you get a number?" asked Rawlings. "No. But it wasn't from here." "What do you mean?" "It wasn't a Minnesota plate. It was from California." "You're sure?" "I'm positive." The caller paused and asked, "Will any of that help?" "Absolutely. A white convertible Saab with California plates? Yes, that will definitely give us something to look out for. I'm sure we'll put out an alert. Who knows if we'll be able to find anything or even if the car is still in the state, but we'll try our damnedest." Okay, how was he going to handle this? How was he going to hook this guy and lure him in, notwithstanding that, first and foremost, they had to rule him out as the perpetrator? The prosecuting attorney would want this guy's sworn testimony of what he'd seen. He was at this point their only lead, and they needed to make the most of him. If they were able to get an ID from the fingerprint, then they'd need this tipster to identify the man he'd seen throwing the weapon into Lake Harriet. If the fingerprint didn't lead anywhere, then Rawlings would have to arrange a photo lineup and see if the tipster could identify anyone. But how was he going to get him to come in, per se, from the cold world of the closet? Rawlings said, "You know, I'd really like to get together with you sometime and thank you in person. I'd like to meet you and talk about this. Could I take you out for a cup of coffee or a beer? Oh, I don't know. I really don't think that's a good idea. How about it, huh? Just a cup of coffee, a beer, something quick and simple. You name the place. This isn't like a trick, is it? You're not going to, arrest me and make me come down to the police station and interrogate me, are you? I mean, I didn't do anything illegal. Of course not, replied Rawlings, wondering if this guy had more to worry about than his sexuality. You've just been very helpful, and I want to meet you, that's all. But I've already told you everything I saw. I know. Listen, all I want to do is get together. Maybe later if you want to make a formal statement or anything, then that would be your decision. Totally your decision. Oh, trust me. No pressure. You just name the time and place. I'll be there. Okay, how about 7 tonight? At Jam's. Do you know where that is? Out on Excelsior Boulevard? Sure, replied Rawlings with a smile, for he'd been to the bar more than several times. I'll see you at Jam's at 9 o'clock tonight. Don't forget, the drinks are on me. All right, the tipster hesitated and added, listen, I should tell you that I'm a photographer, that I've been working on a story. The reason I saw that guy down at the lake is because I followed him there. So I'm positive about the car, and I think you know where to look for it, too. I'm sorry? I'm not sure I understand. I saw you down at the lake yesterday. I asked some cop, and he pointed you out, and then I saw you last night as well. Oh? I'll explain tonight. The tipster hung up, and Rawlings just sat there holding the receiver until the dial tone started blaring in his ear. This guy was a photographer who'd followed the bald man down to Lake Harriet and watched him throw a knife into the water. And then the guy had gone down at the lake again when they'd recovered the knife, and he'd seen Rawlings last night as well. But how was that possible, and where? Holy shit, Rawlings stared down at his notes. It hadn't clicked, not until just now, but hadn't he himself seen that very same car, a white Saab, just yesterday evening? A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.